Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Pan Future Podcast. Today is Saturday, September 30th, 2017, on the verge of turning into October. This week, as per the new format schedule, we have a more of a long-form show. But before we get to the interview I have today, I do have one bit of news that I want to pass along, and it came from outer space. One little bit of news this week, space-related. After a lengthy campaign, Australia gets its own space agency. Though Australia may have been the third nation on the planet, behind the United States and the Soviet Union, to launch a satellite from its own rocket range, after 1967, the space industry in Australia kind of dwindled out, and they've relied on other sources since then. Now they are going to establish an Australian space agency. This comes at the end of some campaigning by quite a few different groups, including universities, industry, and government bodies. So good on you, mate, for that. And another interesting takeaway I got from the article I am reading right now, the Australians currently have a share of 0.8% of the $330 billion global space economy. Now, that's a very small percentage, and that's one of the motivations for establishing this space agency. But I also want to take a moment to pause and rewind that to global space economy of $330 billion. That's quite a bit, and it's only going to grow more and more as our technology allows us to mine asteroids and do other such things. So there you go. Australia is getting its own space agency. On to the main segment this week. I have an interview with astrophysicist Steve Kilston. Kilston is, among other things, a former employee of Ball Aerospace and Lockheed Martin, and has worked on quite a few projects that you have heard of, as you will discover as you listen to the interview. And he was kind enough to sit down with me for a few moments and talk about his Interstellar Consultants group, which the main thrust of which is the design of a generation ship spacecraft that could take us to another star. And one quick thing before we get started. There is some background noise at a few points in the interview. It's not that bad, so I don't think you'll find it too distracting, but it was unavoidable. All right, for this week's show, I have an interview with Steve Kilston of Interstellar Consultants. Welcome to the show, Steve. Thanks for.
Thank you very much.
I guess to get started, give me the introduction about what you're doing. Give me the elevator pitch and make it as long as needed.
I chose the name Interstellar Consultants just so I could have something to put on the business card and on various web identifications, but also I have a small website where I post articles about interstellar travel. I've been interested in that, I guess, ever since I was a kid, reading science fiction. But when I had my last job in the aerospace industry, working for Ball Aerospace in Boulder, Colorado, I had charge of a project for 10 years that was called Terrestrial Planet Finder, and the job was to design future space telescopes that could actually see planets like the Earth and measure what kinds of atmospheres they had, things like that. It never got built yet, but we hope it will eventually.
Yeah, that one, I've actually heard of that one as being something that's been sort of on the books for quite some time.
So I asked, after the first few months working on that project, if we find such a planet like Earth, what should we do about it? and my answer was we should go there. And I checked with a lot of other engineers and scientists about some of the ramifications and requirements for that, and I came up with what I consider a design for an interstellar spaceship that really could work and could be built, but wouldn't be launched for at least 500 years from now, and would take probably about 10,000 years on the voyage. One of these generations ships, it's called. Where
Sure.
the people who start off aren't the people who arrive.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, I chose the name Interstellar Consultants because I checked on Google and there was nothing else with that name.
Yeah, that's how a lot of things end up with names now. Why the 500-year timeline?
Well, I began checking on all the requirements, as I said, and part of that is to develop nuclear fusion, propulsion, and power, and that's not even here yet. Part of it is because the most important thing to do for a generations ship like that is to have a crew populated by people who are not going to be fighting with each other and killing each other and stuff like that. And that's going to take a long time to get that kind of wisdom developed. I think there will be on this ship about 1 million people, so that they will be able to take care of each other and not get bored with each other, and not have genetic problems of too small a group inbreeding and so on.
Sure. So far beyond sort of, I've seen estimates as low as even 80 people as a minimum, but that would be very difficult to manage.
Well, 80 people would not be able to take care of everything that could go wrong on such a voyage.
Yeah.
Taking 10,000 years for the trip is because you don't want to go so fast that if you crash into any little thing, it's going to destroy the ship. Of course, you don't want to go so slow it takes forever either. So I chose a speed that was about 2 to 3 times as fast as the greatest speed that any stars or other objects in our galaxy take. So I figured we could go a little bit faster than those stars, but we shouldn't go too much faster than those. And even the people who talk about going half the speed of light or so on to get there faster, they don't encounter objects without causing a lot of damage at those speeds.
I know. Maybe one of the more well-known works of science fiction, the songs from Distant Earth. Arthur C. Clarke has a ship that travels at some percentage of the speed of light, but it needs a very large ice shield in front, which sounds like it would work, but I would imagine it'd be very difficult to build.
Right. Well, the shields add additional complexity because you have to accelerate them to the same speed that you're getting the ship to. They have to go in front of you, not be.
Yeah.
And that extra mass that you're trying to use that way is something that you sacrifice energy for. Even with the nuclear fusion propulsion I'm talking about, you're going to need, I think it's around close to 10% of the mass of the ship is made for fuel and propellant. And if you had a lot more weight, you'd be sacrificing the number of people. The people that I have on the ship, and I would like it to be people, I hope, not just machines. I have about 100,000 engineers and 100,000 teachers and social worker type people, and
So you're
artists,
moving,
and I want a full city, basically.
Yeah, that's one of the things I talk a lot on my show. It's not just science. A lot of it's about society and civilization. Right. So you're moving an entire civilization,
right,
not just a bunch of technical people who can do the job.
Right, and that is by far the biggest challenge, I think. It's not developing the power, it's not developing the shielding, it's not developing the life support systems. It's actually developing the society itself that can endure that long. Because we haven't had any civilization on Earth lasting that long yet.
No, not yet. Cross your fingers. Would this require what kind of shielding would be in place? I guess in general, even just going into space to the International Space Station, one of the biggest dangers is the cosmic rays.
Yeah, radiation, as a general term, is what I consider very significant danger. Being in space, space is not as nice a place as Earth is for humans. And so I have the ship surrounded by at least a 5-meter thick water layer. The outer layer is water. And that gives you the equivalent shielding of our Earth's atmosphere. Well, just about the same as being at relatively high altitude on the Earth. And you should be as well protected from radiation by that water as the Earth's atmosphere gives you.
It's just a matter of having density significant enough to...
Enough path length of water that the cosmic rays can't get through and do too much. And of course, that much water is about half the mass of the ship. So you're sacrificing already to make that much shielding. I don't want to necessarily have to accelerate something else. That water is also useful for other things like drinking and agriculture
I guess
and recreation.
Even, if you didn't use water for shielding, you would still need to take an awful lot of it with you.
Not nearly that much, but you would need water,
But is that also part of the 500-year timeline, is to acquire that water, to lift that much water off the Earth is far too impractical. So
I'm assuming that once we have the nuclear propulsion in hand, which God knows when that's really going to happen, that kind of energy could be used to lift water up fairly easily. There are water sources probably on asteroids and the moon and stuff that could be used, but I think we could get it off the Earth. It's about 50 million tons of water on a 100 million ton ship.
Artificial gravity, or
the ship is large. The ship is a couple kilometers in diameter, I believe, and when you rotate that at about 1 spin per minute, that gives you the exact equivalent of gravity on the Earth. And 10 meters per second squared gravity, so that the people, and since the ship is pretty much occupied on its shell, only not in the center, everybody gets about the same amount of gravity.
Is it sort of an O'Neill cylinder idea, or is it?
It's a cylinder that is not just a ring like the O'Neill pictures have of the spaceships, but it's a little bit longer, so it can have more people and more things in it. It has to be spinning like that to keep itself stable, and certainly the gravity is the main reason for having it that big. You don't want to have a small one, because then it has to spin faster to give you the gravity, and spinning anybody at more than about 2 revolutions per minute, starts to create the kind of space sickness that we don't want to have. So I've talked to people at MIT about what their experiments show can be endured by people, and then they certainly say that it has to be somewhat slower than 2 revolutions a minute.
Aside from the propulsion system, are there any technical challenges which are still out of our reach, other than just the massive scale of it?
Well, the biggest technical challenge is making anything that's going to last a long time. You may have heard of the 10,000-year project called the Clock of the Long Now.
I'm quite a fan.
Okay, so this is also a 10,000-year project, which I thought of first before they came up with their idea. I think 10,000 years is out there at sort of the main challenge of making something that's going to last. Now, on this ship, with the size that it has, I would have a full pantry of materials, raw materials, and that, I hope, would allow us to repair everything continually over the 10,000-year voyage, so that if things broke, we would create them and fix them. That's why we need so many engineers on board, and machinists and other things like that.
Have the technical challenges changed recently with things like 3D printing?
Well, that helps, I would imagine, to be able to manufacture things to order. I think that we would have enough machines and tools on board to fix those things. I do think that although the people inside will be shielded from radiation by the water, the materials on the outside will still be subject to more space damage, cosmic ray radiation and stuff. I'm not sure how much damage that's going to cause, but that has to be investigated. I am happy that we are still making progress technically, and that's particularly in computers, of course. There's been so much progress in the last 100 years or so that I have a hope that progress will stay rapid, and in another 100 years we might have some of those design problems solved.
Yeah.
I hope that we will also have outposts that we have shown can work on the moon and in Mars and stuff, so we have experienced some other challenges that we will have to solve that the ship will then take advantage of.
Yeah. Do you think along the way that we'll build maybe a large space station near Jupiter, which will incorporate many of the technologies
Well,
that will later be?
I don't know if it'll be near Jupiter. The 500-year timeline I have includes in the last 100 years operating this ship in orbit around the sun, so that people will be able to see what it's like to live on it. So we'll be able to have a shakedown cruise and be able to solve some of the problems before we get too far away from Earth.
Okay.
Before we take off.
With the recent advances in gene editing too, I've thought that that's likely to play a very large role in these ships. However many people you have, it might even be not really even that much of a worry to have diseases and things like that if we have.
Well, medicine, I presume, will make progress also, and biology. All these things will make some progress and may help solve some of the problems. I don't agree with the people who are planning right now some very, very tiny nanoscale spacecraft to go to Alpha Centauri and so on. I don't think that it's adequate to have entirely a machine-based exploration of outer space, because I don't think they can handle all the potential challenges the way a human or life-based intelligence can. And I don't think they can make tiny spacecraft that can actually have the power and aim to send messages back to the Earth to tell us what the heck is going on. So I think we need to have something with fairly large antennas and fairly large power to be able to communicate over large distances.
And would Alpha Centauri be the intended?
Alpha Centauri might. But another thing that's going to happen within a few hundred years, I hope, is that we will know a lot more about the destinations we would go to. We would know which places have good atmospheres and stars that are not going to cause trouble for the planets that are near them. I think that Alpha Centauri might possibly have a planet like that, but we haven't proved that yet. My main goal for the 10,000-year duration of the ship is to go about 20 light years from Earth, which covers a lot of stars in that range, and I'm hoping one of those will be the right place. But the power that's used on the ship is used primarily for acceleration and deceleration, getting to the star. There's a lot of extra power left over if we want to go farther for duration of the flight, because we're just coasting.
Right. So even if you were to arrive somewhere and find it not adequate,
we could continue onward with no problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Steering is a question. You're going to take extra power to change direction.
Sure. Through all the shows I've done and all the high-tech things I've covered, I keep running into the idea, at least as a layman, thinking, you just need to throw a lot more money at this.
I have a budget for this of about $50 trillion. That's approximately equal to the world's gross international product, if you want to call it, right now for 1 year. So if you just took the defense budget of the United States for 70 years or so, that would cover the cost of this.
That's really, in that perspective, that's really not that much.
Not at all. We have all these years. We have other countries contributing. It's now $50 trillion with 1 million people on board is like $50 million per person. Right. So you can make a nice house for each person for $50 million. I actually have a design which has about 10 decks on the outer layers of the ship, and that gives each person enough housing to have like a family of 4. If you're going to have families, that would have about a 5,000 square foot house with 10-foot ceilings or 15-foot ceilings or something. So that's a pretty nice sized house.
Yeah. So that design is, I mean, I'm sure that would help alleviate any social problems as
That would
well.
help
Just to
there.
have,
Yeah,
that.
yeah. The social problems are still the biggest. I emphasize
Yeah.
that over and over.
Yeah.
You're not going to do this kind of ship until you have established a kind of peace on Earth that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
It can't be a competitive environment. It has to be a cooperative environment. Therefore, the kind of things that have happened due to capitalism and competition and wars and other things like that have to be conquered on Earth before we can go.
Yeah. You don't think it would be adequate to ask for volunteers and have some sort of screening process?
Well, you certainly are going to want to choose people who are demonstrably stable and cooperative rather than hostile and aggressive. That screening process may be necessary, but I'm hoping that a large number of people on Earth will be available who meet those criteria. Incidentally, since you ask about the people, when I give the talk about this, I've given it many, many times in different places, I almost always find 20 to 30% of the people I talk to are willing to go on such a trip, even though they won't get there themselves.
Yeah. Do you think that's
They're willing for it to take the adventure.
just for the adventure?
And I presume on this trip you'll have primarily people who are more intelligent on average and more interesting on the average than we have in the planet as a whole right now. And therefore, you'll have a more interesting life if you're on the ship than if you're on Earth.
And I'm sure in order to continue that number of generations, your education system has to be
Right.
what it probably should be here right now.
Right.
It's
Something like
often not.
100,000 teachers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll have a very low student-to-teacher ratio.
Yeah.
And of course, all the things that you have in the modern city, plus things in the future, will be there in terms of the arts and entertainment and information storage and communication with the Earth will exist too, so you won't be cut off from that. And I've also suggested by that time, since you mentioned genetic engineering stuff, that we will probably have clones of every person on the ship back on the Earth or vice versa, so that even if people die on the ship because it doesn't make it, their life will not have been extinguished because there'll be someone here that will continue on who is maybe their twin.
It's an interesting idea.
So I guess you've watched all the science fiction movies and TV shows and stuff, and you're familiar with some of the problems they've brought up.
Yeah.
And I think that we will learn more and more from both fiction and science that will help us solve some of these problems.
Yeah. I think Arthur C. Clarke is my favorite author. I think he's very grounded in potential reality, at least.
That's what I have. As a scientist, an astrophysicist, I've been able to, and as an aerospace engineer, I think I've so far thought of most of the important challenges and some of the solutions that might meet those. But,
What do you think about some of the other solutions that have cropped up in fiction about sending just embryos or DNA to be later?
All those things
built up?
could be included in this kind of concept, but if you don't have people to repair the ship, nothing else is going to work.
Right.
You can't have a ship, as far as I'm aware, that's going to last for 10,000 years and have it run an automatic pilot. I don't have that kind of confidence yet. And I don't really have confidence in computer-driven cars yet either, for the same reason.
Yeah. And I suppose having 100,000 engineers and no one else wouldn't be a very
No, you want to have a
trip
full
at all.
society.
Right,
Everybody needs lots of things beside engineering. That's just one thing.
Yeah. Just as a long-term thought process, this also seems to be completely necessary. Even if you don't go anywhere in particular,
Getting off the Earth's surface.
getting off the Earth is eventually, one way or another, going to be essential.
I have a little display upstairs which includes a competition that was made as to what the what you can best say about humanity or something like that, and in 7 words. and it said something like, "Foolish humans never left Earth."
Yeah. Would the complement of living creatures on the ship include animals, pets, livestock?
Very likely it would include some of that, maybe a fairly large environment. It certainly would have parks and nature kind of facilities. But there's an area where I think it would be possible to do that, partly by taking along embryos and genetic information in the form possibly of computer chips that store all the DNA information. I don't think we would take every single species from Earth along with us. So unlike Noah's Ark, it would not quite have that. I'm not sure that Noah's Ark had a male and female mosquito on board or whatever.
Some other technologies that may or may not be available in the future, which could certainly help build something like this. I would like to get your take on maybe the space elevator is kind of the big one.
That would be a very nice thing. That could get us up at least with less power expenditure to orbit, but it doesn't solve the problem of getting to another star.
No, but in terms of getting, shipping the water into orbit or something
that could help.
How feasible is the space elevator? Is it?
Well, that's a question of materials. It's a question of.
Is it we don't know how to make one yet, or it's not possible to make one?
No, I think we don't know how to make one yet. I think it is potentially possible. I wouldn't give up on something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think there's any feasibility to cryogenic sleep as it's depicted in?
Well, as I said, I don't think that solves the problem. It doesn't solve the problem of maintaining the ship.
Right.
Cryogenic sleep and embryos and all that sort of stuff, and even everything computer generated that you're going to reconstitute life when you get there or something like that.
Yeah.
All those things are possible, but they don't solve the problem of maintaining the ship.
It's really a large flying city, and cities need their maintenance too.
City and civilization, and something that can sustain itself. I mean, we have Spaceship Earth that we're living on. This is going to be a small Spaceship Earth in a way.
Okay. That's a great way to think about it.
Also, of course, I've written that if you can do something like this, presumably when you get some other place, you can build more of them and you can go to other places. You can populate the galaxy at the speeds that I'm talking about within about 30 or 40 million years, which isn't that long in the time scale of the galaxy. Yeah. And the fact that we haven't been visited by anybody like this, as far as we know, indicates to me that we may be among the most advanced intelligences in our galaxy, and therefore, if anybody's going to do it, it should be us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, if we do hear from some others, then they may tell us how to do this better, as in the novel Contact by Carl Sagan.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, that's been an interesting thought I've read lately, that we are actually among the first to be able to consider doing that. Also, of course, I think it's sometimes people don't have the perspective of just how far away everything really is. I have a poster of Kepler discoveries, and it has a picture of the galaxy with what Kepler has looked at. This little tiny sliver of there could be an advanced civilization on the other side of the galaxy, and they're just far away.
Sure. Yeah, there is a lot to still be learned, and I think in the next few hundred years we'll learn much of that. Although the farther away things are, the harder it is to tell that they're here. I worked for the aerospace company that built Kepler, and I'm very familiar with all the people who worked on that.
Yeah.
I feel that's a great first step to sort of make us realize that there are a lot of potential places that this ship could go to.
Yeah.
I don't believe that the will to do this kind of project is going to raise the resources to do it in the near future. That's another reason to wait a while.
Yeah.
But people will have to realize that the Earth is not a long-term solution in terms of billions of years, because the sun will make life here unbearable in about 1 billion or 2 billion years or so.
Yeah. That's as part of my examination of long-term thinking. It seems that humans are not very good at averting a crisis before it happens, even if it's obvious that something will happen eventually. eventually we'll be struck by a large...
Well, that's what science
or
is all
something.
about. I mean, science has to measure what's going on, and things like the ozone hole that we have helped to repair a little by realizing that it was a challenge. And,
Yeah.
I'm hoping that global warming will be another big challenge that people figure out how to meet. There are lots of paths to that. But the biggest challenge of all is the science of psychology and sociology and how we're going to solve those problems.
I don't have any further questions. Is there anything you would like to add?
Well, let me take you upstairs and show you some of the stuff that I've done. And,
sure.
You might enjoy that.
Yeah. There you have it, an interview this week with someone who's got a plan to get us off the planet so the species and the civilization can survive. And that's something I would like to circle around again and emphasize, as was emphasized a few times during the interview. Preserving civilization is a very essential thing here. I did some Generation Ship episodes, maybe back episode 20-something, maybe. It's pretty early on in the podcast. And looking up various research that people have done into how many people you would need and the kinds of resources you would need. It could be a very small number of people who could technically do it, but I think Steve made some excellent points, not only in the number of people you would need to maintain a ship that was traveling that far and taking that long to get there, but also just in the general mental health of your travelers. To move an entire well-functioning city would be a much better idea than just sending a few hundred or a few thousand people in a little tin can across space. So again, thank you, Steve, for sitting down with me for this interview. I really enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed it, you can come to the website, panfuture.org, and find the show notes there, links to Steve's website. And you can also find my Twitter links and the YouTube page and all the other stuff there on the website, and send me a note if you enjoyed this show. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and I will talk to you again in the future.